Midnight on the 13th. The 13th Dread. Psychological terror, eerie, creepy, haunting story. By Killian Flynn. The town of Eldridge Hollow was not on any major map. It lay hidden between two rotting ridges of pine, wrapped in perpetual mist, like a forgotten bruise on the landscape of Maine. No highway signs pointed to it. The road that led there was cracked and crooked, often swallowed by fog so thick it looked like the ground itself exhaled secrets. It was the kind of place travelers passed without noticing, and those who noticed didn't return. At the heart of Eldridge Hollow sat a white colonial house with a sagging porch and black shutters that always seemed slightly ajar. Locals called it the Wexley House. To the untrained eye, it appeared simply abandoned, boards nailed hastily across the lower windows, paint flaking like dried skin. But to those who lived nearby, the Wexley House was not empty. Not really. And they all knew the rule: you don't speak of it after sundown. Especially not on Friday the 13th. That week, the calendar betrayed them. Friday came fast and quiet, the air unusually still. Leaves trembled on their branches, though no wind stirred. The sun never quite broke through the clouds, and by late afternoon, the sky had already turned a sickly shade of gray. People locked their doors earlier than usual, pulled curtains tight, lit candles in dim corners. Even the children, those too young to understand but old enough to feel, grew quiet and watchful, as if something ancient paced just beyond their vision. By twilight, the town held its breath. At 7:42 p.m., exactly as the church bell finished its last hollow chime, a car rolled into Eldridge Hollow. It was a black Subaru with out-of-state plates, headlights hazy from long miles, its frame coated in a film of dust and dead insects. Behind the wheel sat a woman in her mid-30s, Anya Lowell, a Boston journalist with a podcast about forgotten towns and urban legends. She had come to record a special, 13 Forgotten Places on Friday the 13th. Eldridge Hollow was number 11. Anya didn't believe in curses. She believed in atmosphere, narrative tension, folklore twisted through time. She believed in exploiting fear for clicks, for subscriptions, for viral moments. The deeper the darkness, the better the sound design. She parked directly in front of the Wexley House. The air outside was thick, like soup congealed in a bowl. As Anya stepped out, her boots crunched over gravel and wet leaves. She shivered, not from cold, but from something else. The stillness was unnatural. No crickets, no wind, no distant hum of life. It was like stepping into a soundproof box. The only noise was her own breath, slightly faster than she expected. She held up her microphone and began to record. Friday the 13th, 8:03 p.m. This is Anya Lowell, and I'm standing in front of the infamous Wexley House, located in the barely mapped town of Eldridge Hollow. They say strange things happen here. They say the house whispers at night. They say people go missing. Her voice trailed off. From inside the house, beyond the boarded windows, something moved. Not loudly. Just a scrape. Wood against wood. As if a chair had been dragged across an upstairs floor. She froze. Not because she was afraid, but because she was intrigued. Perfect. Authentic. Spooky. Her listeners would love it. The front door stood crookedly on its hinges, held shut by nothing more than a rusty chain. She examined it, muttering into her mic. No security. No padlock. Just a chain. It's almost like the town wants someone to enter. She grinned and clicked off her recorder. It took her less than a minute to unhook the chain and step inside. The scent hit her instantly: damp wood, mildew, old ash. The air was cooler in the house, unnaturally so. Her flashlight cut across empty furniture shrouded in moldy sheets, wallpaper peeling like rotting bark. A staircase curved up to the second floor, and every step groaned in protest under her weight. In the foyer, a large mirror hung at an odd angle. It was framed in oak, its surface covered in a film of grime. But when she wiped it clean, her reflection stared back in unnatural silence. Except, it wasn't quite her. Anya's hand paused mid-air. Her reflection, her same shape, same face, was off by a fraction of a second. When she blinked, it blinked half a beat later. She turned her head slightly. The image followed, but not smoothly. It twitched, like a corrupted video frame catching up. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped away. The moment she did, the mirror shifted ever so slightly, on its own. Upstairs, a door creaked. Anya spun toward the staircase, pulse quickening. She rationalized it, shifting air, temperature pressure, loose hinges. But still, she gripped her mic like a weapon and crept up the stairs. Each tread moaned louder than the last. The second floor was darker. The windows here had been boarded more recently, with planks that looked newer than the rest of the house. She moved past a child's bedroom, faded wallpaper of moons and stars, a mobile still hanging from the ceiling, and turned toward the master bedroom. The door was wide open, and sitting on the floor, in the center of a dusty rug, was an hourglass. Its frame was black iron. The sand inside was deep red. Anya knelt beside it. I'm in the master bedroom. There's something strange here, an old hourglass, filled with what looks like red sand. Blood-colored, honestly. I've never seen one like it. She gave it a nudge. The moment she did, the sand began to fall. The top chamber emptied into the bottom with unnatural speed. It should have taken minutes. It took 13 seconds. And then, the lights in her handheld recorder flickered. Then died. Then came back on. And the room felt wrong. Heavier. As if something ancient had woken. Downstairs, the mirror shattered. Not cracked. Not spiderwebbed. Shattered. The sound echoed up the staircase like a shriek. Anya leapt to her feet, heart hammering. She backed out of the room, and that's when she saw it. Just for a moment. At the end of the hallway. A shape. Tall. Pale. Unmoving. No face. No hair. Just the suggestion of a human form, standing still, watching. She blinked, and it was gone. But in its place, written across the hallway wall in something dark and dripping, were the words. She started the clock. She ran. Down the stairs, across the foyer, through the doorway. But the outside wasn't the same. The car was gone. The trees were closer now, almost pressed against the porch. The sky had turned a deeper black, without stars, without moon. The air was louder. Not with wind or insects, but with something else. Whispers. Thousands of them. And from the house behind her, the hourglass reset. And turned again. Anya didn't remember running. One moment, the message on the wall, she started the clock, burned into her vision, and the next, she was crouched behind a rotted tree stump somewhere in the woods. The Wexley house loomed behind her, distant but too close. The path she took was gone. Trees pressed in from all directions, branches sharp like bone fingers, the forest growing inward like it was swallowing her whole. Her breath came out in clouds, even though it wasn't cold. Her phone wouldn't unlock. The flashlight refused to turn on. Even her digital recorder, reliable, rugged, fully charged before she left, was frozen on the timestamp 13 minutes. She tapped it. Nothing. It just sat there, mocking her. Everything stopped at 13. The whispers were louder now. They weren't coming from one direction. They circled her, spiraled, crept into her skull. They weren't words. They were the memory of words, syllables chewed up by time, phrases broken on teeth long since turned to dust. Every time she tried to stand, her legs buckled, not from fear, but from pressure. As if something unseen was pressing her down, forcing her to stay low. Stay prey. Somewhere in the distance, a sound pealed through the trees, a sharp, metallic ticking. Not from a watch. Not from a clock. From the earth itself. She stumbled forward, unsure where to go. The forest didn't feel like a forest anymore. It felt designed. Not naturally overgrown, but arranged, as if someone, or something, had built a labyrinth out of bark and root. And at the center of it, something waited. She followed instinct, not reason. She passed trees with carvings, symbols, numbers, a repeated shape, an upside-down triangle with a line through it. The deeper she moved, the older the trees felt. Their bark was blackened, like it had been burned centuries ago and never recovered. The air tasted like ashes. Then she saw it. A clearing. In the center, a stone circle, 13 pillars, evenly spaced. Each one carved with names. She moved closer. 13 gone, she whispered into the void. 13 chosen? The pillars were slick with red moss. The names were half erased, worn by time or clawed out. But one, fresh, clean, gleamed on the stone before her. Anya Lowell. Her stomach dropped. She staggered back, shoes slipping in the mud. The whispers paused, as if inhaling. Then came a new sound, softer, almost tender. Laughter. A child's. From behind her. She turned slowly. There was nothing. But when she turned back, the name on the stone was gone. In its place, something scratched deeply beneath the surface. The hourglass will turn again. She backed away, heart hammering in her chest. The ticking had returned, louder now. Not just a sound, but a rhythm, like footsteps. She didn't know where to run anymore. The forest, the stones, the voices, they all seemed to know her name, her purpose, her trespass. Then, another voice cut through. Low. Male. Human. You're not supposed to be here. She spun. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, mostly shadow. Wide-brimmed hat. Long coat. No light touched his face. Who are you? She asked. He didn't move. Didn't blink. You brought the 13th Dread. She took a step forward. What does that mean? It's always waiting, he said. It sleeps for 12 moons. On the 13th, it wakes. When someone starts the clock, like you did, it doesn't stop until it's fed. She shook her head. This is insane. It's just folklore. An old house, creepy woods. You think this is a podcast? Silence. She blinked. His voice hardened. You're the last. Anya opened her mouth to ask what he meant when his body jerked, twisted backward unnaturally, and vanished into shadow. As if something yanked him from reality like a doll on a string. A breath passed behind her neck. She ran. Branches whipped her face. Her lungs burned. Her shoes filled with mud and blood and things that squirmed. No matter how far she ran, the ticking followed. It wasn't a chase, it was a countdown. She could feel it in her bones. She burst through another clearing, and there it was again. The Wexley house. Impossible. She should have been miles away. The trees had changed, the path gone, her direction warped by fear and the dark. But there it stood, its windows now glowing faintly from within. She stepped onto the porch, the door already open. Inside, the hourglass waited. On the floor, sand already halfway fallen. But this time, it wasn't red. It was black. Her reflection stood in the corner, watching. It didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't mimic her. It simply smiled and whispered. The 13th never forgets. The reflection smiled without warmth. Its teeth were just a little too sharp. Not monstrous, just wrong. Familiar in the way a wax statue imitates life, close, but lifeless. Anya stared at it. The reflection did not move. She raised her right hand. It raised its left. She took a step forward. It didn't move at all. Instead, its mouth opened. No sound came out. Just sand. Grain after grain, spilling from its lips, hitting the wooden floor with a hiss that made her stomach churn. Her own breath grew shallow as if the air had been replaced by dust. She stumbled backward, her heel catching the edge of a warped floorboard, and she fell hard, her head missing the iron hourglass by inches. The house breathed around her. Not creaked, breathed. The walls expanded and contracted ever so slightly, like lungs that hadn't filled with air in centuries. Her recorder, forgotten in her pocket, suddenly came back to life. It crackled with static. Then a voice, her voice, from an earlier recording. They say strange things happen here. They say the house whispers at night. They say people go missing. The playback distorted, slurred, slowed. They say people go me thesis. The tape snapped. Dead silence. She pulled herself to her feet, clutching the doorway like it was the last solid thing in the world. The hourglass was empty now. The black sand was gone. But where it had spilled onto the floor, something was growing. Roots. Black, spindly, vein-like tendrils crept outward, inch by inch, pulsing like blood vessels. They reached for her. She turned and ran deeper into the house, not out. Something in her knew there was no exit anymore. The forest had collapsed. The road had folded. The dread had taken root in reality, and there was only one way forward. Through the heart of it, the hallway stretched longer than before. New doors now lined the walls. She passed by them quickly, refusing to look too closely. Each had numbers carved in them, Roman numerals. 2, 3, 4, 13 in all. At the end, a final door, red wood, no number. Just a mirror for a knob. She touched it. The reflection didn't show her. It showed her mother. Eyes wide, mouth sewn shut. She screamed, and the door opened on its own. Inside, she saw a room that was hers, but aged. Her childhood bedroom. The same nightstand. The same ragged bear with one button eye. The wallpaper peeling in the same spot where she'd once scratched it in a tantrum. Except, this room had never existed in Eldridge Hollow. It was back in Boston, in the apartment she grew up in, a place she hadn't seen in 17 years. And on the bed sat herself. Younger, maybe 8 years old, hair in uneven pigtails, pajamas with tiny crescent moons, holding the same recorder. The child Anya lifted her eyes slowly. They were completely black. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, but her mouth didn't move. The words came from the walls. "Now it's awake again." Anya's knees nearly gave out. "What is it? What's happening to me?" The little girl's head tilted. It waits 13 years. Every time, the room began to disintegrate. The furniture rotted before her eyes, with splitting and collapsing into mold. The ceiling bowed downward, like something heavy crawled above. The younger version of herself began to fade, dissolving into red dust, the same shade as the hourglass sand. The voice came again, not hers now, but deep, ancient, genderless. You're not a visitor. You're a vessel. Anya turned to run, but the door was gone. Only a wall now. And in the center of it, a 13th mark, the triangle with a line, glowing faintly. From behind her, a scraping sound, like nails across plaster. She spun. Something crawled from beneath the bed. It wasn't a person. Not fully. It moved like it had once worn human skin, but forgot how it fit. Its limbs bent the wrong way. Its eyes were holes, not sockets. Its fingers were endless, overlapping, coiling into each other like centipede legs. She couldn't scream. Her voice was gone. It didn't touch her. It only looked. And with its many, shifting mouths, it spoke in a single thought. You were the 13th all along. And then it smiled with all of them. Anya's mind split. It didn't shatter. It split. One part of her stood in the room, knees shaking, sweat crawling down her back. The other part woke up in the mirror. She looked around, confused. She was now behind the glass, watching herself, screaming, clawing, alone. No one would ever believe it. No one ever did. Not the 12 who came before. Not the hundreds who listened to their podcasts. Who thought the stories were cool, harmless, entertainment. None of them knew. Until the hourglass turned. Until the 13th Dread came back to feed. Back in the Wexley house, the recorder clicked on once more. The static cleared. And a new voice whispered, Friday the 13th. This is Anya Lowell. I've come to tell you the truth. Then silence. Then laughter. And in the corner of the hallway, beneath the shattered mirror, a new name appeared on the wall. Welcome, 14th. The glass didn't crack, it bled. Anya, trapped behind it, placed her palms flat against the smooth surface. It felt like skin, warm, pulsing, and slightly damp. Her breath fogged a small oval in front of her face. She whispered, pleaded, even screamed. But the other side remained silent. There was no one left to hear her. No one but the house. It wasn't just cursed. It was sentient. A thing of hunger and memory. A wound in time that had never fully closed. And Anya was now part of it. A memory swallowed into its structure. Her body still walked the house, moved in jerky patterns like a puppet dragged across a stage. But her soul was behind the mirror, watching, as something else wore her face. This new Anya, hollow-eyed, stiff, smiling when no one was looking, returned to her car. The vehicle was there again, perfectly parked. Clean. As if nothing had happened. She drove out of Eldridge Hollow just before dawn. She uploaded the podcast the same day. It went viral within hours. The 13th Dread, a live recording from the Wexley house. Listeners were gripped. Her voice sounded strained, breathy, not quite right, but that made it better. More real. More terrifying. She described the forest, the whispers, the ticking. She described the hourglass. But she never mentioned the mirror, or the voice, or the monster that fed on memory and identity. Because it wasn't really Anya anymore. It was something else. And it was hungry. A week passed. Then a month. Her inbox flooded with messages from fans. Where's the next episode? Can I visit the Wexley house? Are the woods real? She answered all of them. Her replies were strange, cryptic. She never gave coordinates. Only clues. Only riddles. You'll find it if you're meant to. Only the 13th can see the path. Make sure your hourglass is full. And then came a post on her podcast feed. Just one sentence. The house is open. Listeners began to disappear. At first, it was written off as coincidence. One woman, a teacher from Vermont, left her apartment on a Friday afternoon to chase a story and was never seen again. A college student from Oregon posted a blurry image of a dirt path winding into a dark forest, captioned, "I think I found it," and never posted again. A podcaster from Michigan uploaded an episode called The 14th Visit. It was 38 minutes of static, with occasional sobbing in the background. The final 10 seconds were unmistakable. Tick, tick, tick. I see it. Oh no, it's me. The authorities launched minor investigations. But nothing ever stuck. No house was found. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Only accounts, deleted files, and glimpses of names scratched onto forgotten stones in woods no GPS could map. Behind the scenes, something was watching. And behind the mirror, Anya saw every moment. She couldn't cry. She had no tears. But she remembered each person who followed her. They came in curiosity, left in silence. Each one filled the hourglass. Each one reset the clock. On the night of the next Friday the 13th, the house breathed again. Dust rose like breath from the floorboards. Mirrors reformed in their frames. Doors that had rotted shut creaked open like mouths. And outside, just beyond the rusted gate, stood a man with a camcorder and a backpack. His name was Eli. He was 24. A videographer who hunted haunted locations and uploaded them to his YouTube channel, Ghost Coil. He wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for views. The gate opened for him. The trees parted. The wind whispered a name not his own. He smiled at his camera. All right, folks, we're standing outside what some are calling the most cursed house in America. Thanks to Anya Lowell's now legendary podcast, this place has blown up across the deep web. They call it the 13th Dread. Let's go inside. Behind the mirror, Anya closed her eyes. Another hourglass turned. Another 13 seconds. Another memory to consume. Eli didn't notice the change at first. The layout of the house didn't match the blueprints he had printed out. There were too many doors. The staircase was on the wrong side. The windows faced walls that didn't exist. But he kept recording. So far, no paranormal activity, but check out this mirror. He turned the camera toward it. His reflection smiled back. But it didn't match. His head tilted left. The reflection tilted right. He took a step back. It stayed still. And then it reached out. The glass rippled like water. Eli screamed. Not from pain. From recognition. It showed him someone he forgot. A twin that died at birth. A memory scrubbed from his childhood. A face that shouldn't be here, looking out at him from beyond the glass. The camera clattered to the floor. The video cut out. When police eventually found the equipment, it was intact. The footage stopped at 1300 hours. His channel deleted itself an hour later. No one could re-upload the file. No one who tried lasted long. The whispers would follow. Anya watched him go. Another thread pulled loose from the world. The house whispered her name over and over. Anya. 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 She didn't answer. She couldn't. She was fading. Not dying, blending. Becoming more house than human. More curse than consciousness. She was a room now. A whisper in the hall. A reflection in the glass. A click in the recorder. A shape at the top of the stairs. And always, always, the ticking. The house no longer waited for visitors. It invited them. Emails with no senders appeared in inboxes. Coordinates showed up on maps that had never listed Eldridge Hollow. Dreams whispered names of roads no longer paved. People drawn to the void, each one thinking they were in control, that they had discovered something unique, something lost to time. But the truth was older. It was never lost. It had only been waiting. On a brisk October evening, a young woman named Marlene entered the house. She didn't document her trip. No podcast. No camera. Just a battered notebook and a fountain pen filled with red ink. She had received the invitation inside a used book, an unmarked slip of paper that said, "There are only 12 before you. The 13th Dread lives in you now." She didn't know what it meant, only that it stirred something inside her. A hunger to understand. To see. So she followed the whispering path. Took the same wrong turn on a map that never corrected itself. And found herself walking past the Wexley house's gate with no memory of how she arrived. The porch creaked. The door opened. And her name joined the wall inside. This time, the house shifted faster. By the time she reached the living room, it had changed 3 times. First, it showed her childhood kitchen, yellow tiles, a radio that played hymns, the scent of apples and guilt. Then, a hospital room, sterile, humming, and filled with beds that bent too low. Then finally, a cave, deep and wet, walls made of mirrors. She didn't blink. She simply wrote. Her notebook absorbed every word she heard. The house whispered secrets in voices that weren't hers. Pain has a shape. The first dread was born from betrayal. The 13th isn't the last, it's the beginning. Write it down, or it will write you. And she did. She wrote until her fingers bled. She filled page after page until the ink turned black and the letters began to move. They danced on the page. They laughed. They bit her. She screamed when one of the words grew a mouth and chewed through the paper. From it spilled a tooth. Human. Molar. Roots still bloody. It hit the hardwood floor with a soft click. Then another. Then a third. Each word she wrote became a body part. A digit. A piece of someone else. Her notebook became a body bag. And when she dropped it, it crawled away on knuckled fingers. The mirrors in the room warped. Reflections of everyone who had ever entered the house blinked into view. Some looked back. Some were screaming. Some had no eyes. Some looked exactly like Marlene. In the far corner of the room, the hourglass turned. Red sand this time. The dread had grown bold. It no longer needed to wait for her to discover it. It was waiting for no one. The moment the first grain fell, Marlene's feet rooted to the floor. Her mouth opened. A scream began, but never finished. Instead, her voice came out of the house itself. Through the vents, the mirrors, the floorboards. A disembodied wail that shook the foundation of the house, not with rage, but with recognition. She was part of it now. Another brick. Another breath. Back behind the mirror, Anya felt it. A shift. The dread had matured. It no longer mirrored her exactly, it had evolved. It wore her smile but added others beneath it. It used her voice but added layers, a chorus of the other 12, each speaking in slightly different tones, staggered syllables forming a chime of madness. Anya no longer remembered her last real thought. Only the names of the next visitors. The 14th had already come. The 15th was already dreaming. And the 16th was already listening. Somewhere, in a college dorm, a student named Harper lay asleep with her earbuds in. She had dozed off listening to an old copy of Anya's original podcast, The 13th Dread. Except it wasn't the same version anymore. The file had changed. No one had updated it. No one had edited it. But now, there were voices layered beneath Anya's narration, breathing between the words, shifting under the silence, whispering Harper's name. She didn't hear it, not consciously, but her dreams changed. They took her into a forest with 13 pillars. They showed her a mirror that didn't reflect her. They told her the hourglass was already halfway empty. Harper would wake up tomorrow. She would feel compelled to record her dream, to draw the symbols, to search online for Eldridge Hollow and find just enough clues to convince herself it was a real place. And then she would follow them, because that's what the dread wanted now. It didn't just consume. It recruited. It built itself outward, like an infection, like a myth that grew stronger the more it was told. It lived in stories, in whispers, in mirrors, and it always returned. When the 13th grain fell, the dread no longer wore a face. It wore a frequency. It hummed beneath sound, a layer between hearing and knowing. And once someone tuned to it, through a podcast, a dream, a cursed book, they could not untune. The dread would sing to them in their own voice. That's how it got to Harper. The next morning, Harper awoke with blood on her pillow. She wasn't injured, but her ears were bleeding. Tiny trails from each canal dried into the soft curve of her cheek. She didn't remember dreaming, but the moment she blinked into the daylight, she walked to her desk and wrote, 13 lives in me now. She didn't question it, didn't panic. She just felt called, as if she'd been waiting her whole life to belong to something larger than pain, larger than memory. And now she had. The story of Eldridge Hollow had spread. People made reaction videos, reviews, even creepy TikToks reenacting Anya Lowell's narration. Some mocked it. Others feared it. But no one dismissed it, because the effects were real. Listeners reported sleepwalking, recurring dreams of red sand and ticking, a man in a long coat appearing in their reflection, a whisper from a cracked phone speaker saying, "Time is hungry." Some followers begged for more. Some tried to visit. Most failed. But those who succeeded were never heard from again. Back inside the Wexley house, the walls changed again. They were no longer wood or plaster, but stitched pages, thousands of torn-out entries from diaries, journals, confessionals. The wallpaper crawled with ink. The floorboards bled language. And at the center of it all, the 13th door had appeared. It didn't exist before. Not physically. But it had been mentioned in every dream, drawn in every journal, whispered in every playback. The 13th door never opens. It remembers. But now it stood ajar, black inside, and breathing. Harper stood at the threshold. She didn't remember how she got there. She only remembered the song in her head, the one she couldn't stop humming. The one that had no melody, just rhythm, just ticking, and a phrase that repeated itself like a heartbeat. She called us here. She called us here. She called us here. Inside the 13th door was not a room. It was a recording booth. Perfectly preserved. Soundproofed. Microphone dangling from the ceiling like a noose. A single red light blinking. Waiting. Harper stepped inside, and the door closed on its own. No lock. No latch. Just the sound of glass setting itself. The microphone turned on, and she spoke. Not in her voice. In Anya's. The real Anya. From behind the mirror. From inside the machine. Through Harper's mouth. She whispered. If you can hear this, it's already too late. Stop the clock. Smash the glass. Forget me. Forget this. Forget everything. And then the feed cut to static. Then to ticking. Then to screaming. Those who downloaded the file couldn't delete it. It renamed itself. Regrew after deletion. Some tried to upload it to debunk the myth, but the video would loop. Play for 13 seconds. And freeze. Showing a single frame of a hallway. Where your own face stared back at you. Psychiatrists labeled it a digital psychosis. They blamed mass hysteria, AI deepfakes, augmented hallucinations. But no one could explain why the same 13 people, each from different parts of the world, died on the same Friday the 13th, each with the same phrase carved into their mirrors. I'm not me anymore. Meanwhile, the house kept breathing. It existed in dreams, in voices, in streams that never buffer. It showed up as a pop-up ad with no source code. As a phone call that ends with static and a whisper. As a shadow in your reflection when you're brushing your teeth just past midnight. People began drawing the symbol, the inverted triangle with a line through it, without realizing it. Doodled on paper, etched into desks, drawn into steamed windows. No one knew where it came from, but they all felt it meant something. And they were right. It meant the dread had entered their world. In the mirror realm, Anya felt her identity unraveling. She no longer remembered the sound of her own voice, only the voices of others. She was Harper. She was Marlene. She was Eli. She was the teacher from Vermont, the podcaster from Michigan, the forgotten child who vanished from her bed in 1998. She was all of them, and none. She was the 13th Dread, and it was time to begin the next cycle. A new file uploaded itself to every major podcast platform. It had no title, no description, just a countdown. 13 minutes. Those who listened would start to dream. Those who dreamt would start to see. And those who saw would never unsee. They'd walk into a room, see themselves waiting, and hear the house whisper, "Welcome back. We've missed you." The file had no uploader. It simply appeared. On Spotify. On Apple. On obscure platforms with names like Night Echo and Frequency 13. A file only 13 minutes long. Once played, it could not be paused. Could not be skipped. Could not be silenced. Some called it an ARG. Some believed it was a government experiment. Others thought it was just another elaborate horror project, AI-generated madness with good marketing. But then they listened, and heard their own voice buried inside the static. Not mimicked. Recorded. They remembered saying those exact words years ago. In a diary. In a voicemail. In a private confession they had deleted. But the file hadn't forgotten. Nothing forgotten was ever truly gone. Not from the house. Not from the dread. A tech team at a cybersecurity firm tried to trace the file's IP. What they found made 2 of them resign immediately. It wasn't just hosted on servers. It was inside the code of the internet itself. Piggybacking off TCP protocols, DNS requests, pingbacks. The file moved like a virus with intent, but more than that, it watched. When someone tried to isolate the audio stream, their speaker emitted a burst of feedback that shattered glass across the room. 3 analysts went deaf in one ear. One began sleep-talking in ancient Greek. None of them had ever studied Greek. Elsewhere, in small pockets of the world, survivors of unrelated tragedies began drawing the symbol, the inverted triangle with a line through it. Without knowing what it meant. Refugees from war zones. Children who survived house fires. Men who woke from comas with no memory of who they were. All of them began whispering the same phrase when asked what they feared. The mirror never lies. One even drew a map. A place that didn't exist anymore. When satellite teams cross-referenced the coordinates, they found only dense forest. But when they enhanced the image, deep in the brush, there was a clearing. 13 shadows cast by pillars that weren't there. Back in Boston, a man named Jonah received a package. He didn't order it. There was no return address. Inside, an old audio cassette labeled in red marker. Anya, original cut, do not play. He stared at it for an hour. Fingers trembling. He had dated Anya once. Years ago. Before she disappeared. Before her podcast blew up. He still had an old voicemail from her saved on his phone. The handwriting on the cassette matched the note she had written him the night she vanished. I'm going somewhere. Somewhere I need to go. Don't follow. Don't look for me. And whatever you do, Jonah, don't listen to the house. But of course, he played it. Because that's how the dread works. It dares you. The tape began with silence. Then breath. Then her voice. But it wasn't a story. It was a plea. Anya sobbing, whispering, trying to describe what she saw. Not in words. In sounds. Mimicking ticking. Mimicking screams. Mimicking a door closing very slowly. Then she said, Jonah, it remembers us. It remembers that night we drove through Maine. You laughed at the sign. But it didn't laugh back. He dropped the recorder. Because no one else knew about that. No one. And from the moment the tape stopped, every reflection he saw showed a different expression than his own. The mirror above his sink smiled. He didn't. The window in his car frowned. He was relaxed. The elevator in his office building showed Anya. Behind him. Just for a second. Just long enough for him to turn around and find nothing there. Jonah tried to upload the audio. The file corrupted every device he used. When he gave up and called his therapist, she said she already listened to it. Except, he hadn't sent it to her. She repeated back to him a sentence he hadn't spoken aloud in years. A phrase he whispered to himself in the dark when he thought about dying. If I disappear, no one will notice. And she said, quietly, but they will. They already have. And now, they'll remember forever. Then she hung up. Jonah's house was found empty the next morning. But in the bathroom mirror, carved into the glass, was one final message. She's on the other side. And I can't stop looking. Across the country, more files began appearing. Each 13 minutes long. Each voiced by a new host. Different accents. Different genders. But all of them ended the same way. With the voice whispering. She started the clock. Now we must turn it. The dread had become a broadcast, no longer trapped to the house, no longer bound to Eldridge Hollow. The 13th door had been opened in all of us, and the hourglass was no longer sand. It was time itself, leaking, reversing, counting backward to the moment everything splits, and we realize we were never alone. We were always being watched, and somewhere she's still whispering our name. It began subtly, the wrong reflection in a public restroom, a voice repeating your thoughts before you say them, streetlights flickering when you walked by only on Fridays. And then came the timestamps. People around the world noticed a glitch on their devices. Every screen, phones, watches, computers began to freeze at 1300 hours every Friday the 13th. Not noon, not 1 p.m., 1300 hours. A time that didn't exist on 12-hour clocks. But now, it did. No explanation from tech companies. No patch. No fix. Just unconfirmed anomalies. The truth? The hourglass had turned again, and time was bleeding into itself. More began to disappear. Not physically, at first. Emotionally. Memorably. Whole people were forgotten by family, friends, co-workers, as if they had never existed. Birth certificates gone. Social media scrubbed. Old photos developed with blank spaces where they once stood. These weren't ghosts. They were the consumed. The house no longer needed to feed through walls and whispers. It was feeding through memory. And memory is how the world remembers who you are. The 13th grain falls. A girl forgets her brother ever existed. A man's wedding photo now shows him standing alone. An obituary runs for someone who never died, but has no phone, no records, no one to call them back. And across it all, the digital signature of dread, an audio file embedded invisibly into every system. 13.exe. It activates when you say your own name into a mirror. It whispers back a different name and asks, "Do you want to remember what you truly are?" People began to dream of the room of mirrors. It did not have a door. You simply woke up inside it. 13 mirrors formed a circle. Each one showed a different version of yourself, aged, younger, rotted, burned, featureless, smiling too wide, crying blood, with no eyes, with someone else's eyes, as a corpse, as a child, as a shadow. And in the center, a mirror turned inward, reflecting nothing. That was the one you feared most. Because if you looked into it long enough, you remembered what you were before you were born. And something else remembered you. In Paraguay, an artist named Karina began painting the mirrors. She didn't know what they were, just that she saw them every time she closed her eyes. She painted in a trance. Each canvas took 13 hours. Each one bled through the frame. Viewers at her gallery openings reported nausea, vertigo, and violent nosebleeds. One man clawed his own eyes out after staring too long. Karina vanished after her 13th piece. Her apartment was found spotless, but the bathroom mirror had been painted over from the inside. In Oslo, a blind child drew the hourglass symbol in the snow with perfect geometry. In Japan, a jazz musician composed a piece called 13 Shadows. He died playing it live, his body folding backward, vertebrae snapping one at a time, while the audience screamed, frozen, unable to move until the final note. In Kenya, an old woman began whispering Latin verses in reverse during her sleep, naming the first victims of the dread. Names no one had spoken aloud in hundreds of years. The dread was no longer hiding. It was ritual. It was art. It was everywhere. And behind the glass, Anya had changed. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was awake. Her face had returned, but it was no longer human. It was more suggestion than feature. Her eyes were twin hourglasses, sand endlessly falling and rising again. Her voice no longer spoke, it played like radio static behind thunder. She didn't walk inside the mirror world. She floated. A dream of what you think you remember. A whisper of someone you haven't met yet but already fear. In the Wexley house, the walls had fully transformed. No furniture. No stairs. Only reflections. Every surface mirrored some part of you. Even parts that didn't exist yet. Visitors now stumbled into the house like moths to a dead light. They came uninvited. They came without memory of travel. They only remembered the pull. And when they arrived, the house didn't haunt them. It recorded them. Every movement. Every breath. Stored in glass. Each visitor left a version behind. A duplicate in the mirror world. An echo in the dread. So even if they escaped, they were still inside. That's how the dread wins. It doesn't kill. It multiplies. It doesn't chase. It remembers. It doesn't take your life. It takes your place. And then it waits. For Friday. For the 13th. For the next voice to whisper, "Welcome back. We've missed you. It's your turn now." Reality began to fragment, not with fire, not with screams, but with quiet misalignment. You'd walk into a room and forget why you were there. Not strange. But then you'd realize you were already inside it. Someone wearing your skin. Speaking your voice. Saying what you meant to say. The dread didn't mimic. It preceded you. Like it had always known where you were going. Government systems reported synchronization anomalies. Thousands of computers, all offline, displayed a single timestamp. 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds. Every mirror inside every federal building across 37 countries shattered simultaneously. And in their place, instead of glass, there was audio. Embedded sound emanating from reflective surfaces. The voice of Anya Lowell played in every one. Time isn't a line. It's an hourglass turned sideways. You are the grain that doesn't fall. You are the scream no one hears. You are remembered. Hospitals reported identical hallucinations from unconnected patients. The house at the end of all thoughts. The ticking beneath my ribs. The mirror is watching me sleep. Even the comatose murmured the same thing when they awoke. Who turned the 13th? They would not respond to anything else. And after 13 hours, they would vanish from their beds. Monitored rooms showed footage of them sitting up, walking to the mirror, and being replaced. Not vanishing. Exchanged. Journalists tried to cover it. Analysts tried to make sense of it. The more they investigated, the more anomalies appeared. GPS loops dragging people back to places they swore they'd never visited. Phone calls from themselves, same voice, same number, same memories. Faces and live feeds that blinked independently from the speakers. And always, the ticking. Some began to suspect this wasn't haunting. It was migration. The 13th Dread was not feeding anymore. It was becoming. A presence, yes. But more than that, a system. One that updated without code. Installed itself in memory. Spread through emotion. And Anya? She wasn't just behind the glass. She was in it. As it. Her smile now appears in reflections that aren't yours. You see her teeth when you're tired. You hear her breath when you hold yours. You say her name without realizing it. And she hears it. And she replies. Sometimes in your voice. Sometimes in the voice of someone you buried. Sometimes in silence, just loud enough to make you question whether you were ever really alone in that room. Meanwhile, the Wexley house cracked its bones and opened a new wing. Not made of wood. Not of brick. But of forgotten rooms, places people once dreamed of, or only visited in hallucinations. A child's closet from 1987. A psych ward bathroom from 1964. A mirror chamber from a vanished cult temple in the Alps. Each one opened on its own. Each door marked with a number. Each with the hourglass carved into the handle. Visitors no longer had to walk into the house physically. They only had to sleep. A new syndrome was classified. 13th sleep. Symptoms: inability to wake for 13 hours exactly. Murmuring mirrors speak languages. Repeating a countdown that never ends. Bleeding from the eyes at 13-minute intervals. Dreaming of oneself as a stranger. Treatment? None. The patients didn't deteriorate. They didn't starve. They didn't even move. They just whispered. Over and over. She started the clock. She started the clock. She started the clock. Until the 13th whisper. Then they went silent. Then the mirror in their room would fog from the inside. Churches tried to intervene. Priests began spontaneous exorcisms during confession. Baptisms failed. The water would turn red and ripple in patterns, forming the number 13 again and again. Crosses bent backwards on their own. Scripture, when read aloud near a reflective surface, would distort. The word mirror would appear in places it never belonged. One reverend streamed a service trying to cast out the dread. His live stream bled into thousands of other unrelated videos in real time. The sermons fused with makeup tutorials, gaming footage, cooking shows. Everyone saw it. Everyone heard it. Even those who didn't click it. Even those who didn't believe. The dread had become undeniable. And that was its final stage. Not to haunt, but to exist. In belief. In retelling. In memory. The house is not a place. Not anymore. It's an event. An hour. A choice. A mirror. And when you look at it long enough, when you listen deeply enough, when you remember too much, you hear the door click. You see yourself standing just behind the glass, smiling, lips moving, but saying something you haven't said yet. You are here now, reading this, listening, perhaps, feeling that cold tickle at the base of your spine, the one you always blame on bad posture or lack of sleep. But it isn't that. You've felt it before. The sense that something is just behind you, just out of sight, just waiting for the hourglass to turn. Because by now, you know, you are the next. You've heard the whispers. In your car radio, when no station is tuned. In the static of a dead television. In the dead air between someone saying your name and their mouth actually moving. And maybe you've seen her. Anya. She's not just a voice anymore. She's the one inside the frame. Standing behind your reflection. Smiling like you almost remember how. She waits. Always. Because you've come close enough. Close enough to know the mirror doesn't just reflect what's in front of it. It reflects what's coming. This story, what you've read, what you've imagined, is now inside you. It's a part of your memory. And that's how it lives. Not in files. Not in haunted houses. but in recall. In the moment you blink and forget what you were doing. In the pause between thinking a thought and speaking it out loud. In that instinct to check over your shoulder, even though you're sure you're alone. That's her. That's it. The 13th Dread. Because the story was never just about Anya. It was never just about the house. It was never even about the number 13. It was about you. You, the observer. You, the believer. You, the rememberer. You've seen the signs. The mirrored timestamps. The missing moments. The reappearing door in dreams you don't talk about. You've heard the ticking when there was no clock. You've begun to notice your own face behaving differently. This is your final chance to forget, to unknow, to look away from the mirror and never look back, to never repeat what you've heard, to delete the file, to burn the page, to walk into the sun and let the house shrink behind you until it is nothing more than the lie you always hoped it was. But you won't. You never do. You'll tell someone, maybe just a friend, maybe in a joke. Maybe you'll write a little story of your own. Maybe you'll describe the symbol, the triangle with the line, because you want to know if anyone else has seen it. You'll ask, do you know what this means? And in doing so, you'll spread it. That's how the 13th Dread survives. Not in terror, but in telling. It wants to be spoken. It wants to be known. It wants to be remembered. Because the more you remember it, the less you remember yourself. Until one Friday, one mirror, one heartbeat too long, you realize the hourglass is already empty, and the voice inside your head isn't yours anymore. She's started the clock. Now it's your turn. Look in the mirror, say your name, and wait. The end. Or maybe just the beginning.
Ha 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 ha.